of the Capitol.
All right, Congressman Dan Donovan, always a pleasure. Thanks for making time.
Thank you, Chris.
Joining me now, Haley Byrd, congressional reporter for the Independent Journal Review, and Matt Fuller, congressional reporter for the Huffington Post. And you guys have both been doing fantastic work. So here's Matt. You were really on the pulse of the House bill. When you said it wasn't going to happen, it didn't happen. When you said it looks like there's a path, there's a path. So I trust you on this. What's your current determination about the state of play on this Senate bill?
Well, the current state of play is pretty obvious. I mean, clearly McConnell doesn't have the votes. I think you laid it out pretty well there. You look at who you have in this conference. He can only lose 2 votes, right? You have Dean Heller off the top saying he's against the bill. You have Susan Collins, who's from the very start has looked like unlikely, as if she really just can't support this or really just won't. And then from there you have a bunch of conservatives who have their own set of issues. Rand Paul, another one. I think conservative leaders, or rather, Mitch McConnell, John Cornyn, they had sort of written Rand Paul off a little bit and thought maybe, we could do this with losing Rand Paul, losing Susan Collins. Well, Dean Heller really throws that,
that's right,
that game plan into, chaos. And now you have all these other senators, as you mentioned, Shelley Moore Capito, Rob Portman, a lot of these senators who the Medicaid expansion has benefited their state, and there's really no impetus for them to support this bill when it's just going to hurt their constituents.
So Haley, the Mike Lee, Rand Paul objections, I guess how overcomable do you see those, and how rigid are they? Mike Lee basically put down a marker and said there's got to be some kind of state option to entirely opt out of the ACA, which would of course mean getting rid of things like pre-existing condition protections, guaranteed issue, right? Lifetime caps, all these very popular patient protections. Do you think he's going to stick to that?
That's a good question. I think, as we saw in the House Freedom Caucus and conservatives also started out from that really far-right position of wanting all 12 ACA mandates repealed, or at least the ability for states to do so. But, as negotiations went on, Meadows and the Freedom Caucus eventually ended up, settling for just community ratings and essential health benefits. Rand Paul and Mike Lee have both indicated in some form or fashion that the House bill, if it was put on the Senate floor, might not have been conservative enough for them. So that's a concern.
Right.
Yeah,
because Mike Lee's marker, we should say, is even more radical than what the Meadows Amendment, what the MacArthur Amendment in the House. Again, remember, that was states can get out of these essential health benefits, which are, also pretty popular. So you're saying they already were saying that's not enough. What were you going to say, Matt?
Well, that's really, if that's the case, that's kind of the ball game here, right? If you take Collins and Heller at their word, and I just don't see Lisa Murkowski, for instance. She's someone who has made the pre-existing conditions part of her problems, as well as a lot of these Alaska-specific issues. And then there's maybe a whole host of other senators who have the same sort of issue. A lot of Republicans campaign on the fact that, we want to repeal Obamacare, but we want to keep those pre-existing condition protections, including the president himself, we might add.
Right, and this is why I thought Ron Johnson's op-ed was interesting. Ron Johnson explicitly calling to revoke the pre-existing condition protections. He says it leaves in place the pre-existing condition rules that drive up costs. We should look to improve successful models for protecting individuals, pre-existing conditions, yada, yada, yada.
Right. His position is the pre-2009 system, but the only problem with Ron Johnson's position is he sort of made it clear that he'll vote for if it's incrementally better, if he thinks it's a little bit better than Obamacare. So he's one of those votes where, he's talking about sort of radical, right, extremely gettable. He's not someone who I would count on at the end of the day. Is Ron Johnson going to be the one to hold this up? He might be the 8th or 9th vote, but he's not going to be the 3rd vote, which is the one that sinks it.
All right, Haley Byrd and Matt Fuller, thank you both.
Thank you.
Coming up with the healthcare vote postponed.